another edition of the BFF show. My name is Brendan.
I'm Franco.
And we are recording this at the tail end of July. And what a July it was. Our YouTube page is up. Franco, what's the address for the YouTube page?
It's the BFF show on AMP.
Yes, go there
www.youtube.com/the BFF show.
People know that. They know that.
Well, it's not always obvious. I know our parents probably watch and they have no idea what we're talking about. So,
if you had to guess, what's the percentage of the population that still needs the prompt www?
Like 20%.
20%.
Are we not counting like infancy and like toddlers? Because
okay, well, that's a good point. I think I would even say 2-year-olds by this point, because I was reading. I know this is not what we plan to talk about, but it's fun. 2-year-olds is around the age when you first get your electronic device. So I think toddlers do count. I think they know. You just go to youtube.com. You don't go to www.
All right, we'll call it 18%.
18%. And then 100%, here's a factoid, 100% of users for AOL still need the www prompt. That's a joke.
Good to know.
Nope, that was a bad joke. I'm sorry.
Yeah, it was bad. That missed the mark.
I like nostalgia. Let's go into some of the topics for today that we have. We got a lot to talk about. The big dominating story, though, is for amusing reasons. I think we're not looking at this from an analytical perspective. I get the feeling this is more of the humorous perspective. Kyrie Irving wants out so badly of Cleveland and getting away from LeBron James that the latest report that I read was that the Cleveland Cavaliers haven't even spoken to Kyrie Irving and don't really quite know where he is after it got leaked to the media that he wanted out and that he had a meeting with the team. Although it's shades of a couple of years ago when there was other rumors that he had wanted out and that they were even considering trading him. And now you have a situation where it seems literally, it's weird to me that they were in the finals. Like, it doesn't compute that the level of insanity surrounding this team is the same team that months ago was in the finals and was thought of as being a major contender in the East yet again. And now it looks like we've got a lot of problems in Cleveland from the GM's gone. You have LeBron with a year left. You got Tyronn Lue in the hot seat from many analysts on Fox Sports, ESPN, that think that if he can't pull this together, that he's going to be out. Franco, what are your thoughts on this?
That's a lot to unpack. We'll start with the fact that Kevin Durant had an excellent tweet, I think, or a quote maybe, that he was so proud that he could single-handedly dismantle the Cleveland Cavaliers franchise. Probably not that inaccurate. I think the biggest thing here to notice is that there's a trend now with LeBron James. And he may be the best basketball player to play right now, but he alienates people at a speed that's pretty impressive. Like, he's that frat guy at the party that won't stop headbutting people. Like, he's fun at first until he headbutts you, and all of a sudden you want to get the hell away from him. That's LeBron James right now in the NBA, and it's kind of funny given how talented he is.
Do you think that this is more because there's a couple narratives that have percolated up throughout this past week or so, one of which being, that Kyrie is tired of being in LeBron's shadow. It's purely that because as the number one draft pick, that he had that team that was his team until LeBron decided to come back. Is that part of it, or do you really think it's still the LeBron factor that's playing more of a role than we realize right now?
I think that's a really easy narrative to put out if you're Kyrie. I think it's more he started playing with LeBron. And I think that makes sense because if you watch LeBron on the floor, he's not the most friendly dude to be on the team. I mean, this is not Shaq back when Shaq was fun, or Michael Jordan when he was tying in Pippen and Rodman. This is a guy that had the decision live on TV. He's the same guy that pushed away teammates when he was with Miami. It's kind of fitting the narrative of LeBron more than it is fitting the narrative of Kyrie.
If you are a potential free agent and you're looking at the landscape of the NBA and you're seeing whether or not you want to dial into Cleveland, how do you even consider that as an option at this point? And where do you see long-term the Cleveland Cavaliers go? Because I feel like they're always, until LeBron retires, always going to be associated with LeBron, for better or worse. And that association may be to the detriment of their long-term health.
I think you're absolutely correct. I think it's definitely detrimental in the long run. I think LeBron's out of there in the next 2 years, to be honest with you. He wants to play in LA. He wants to do his old friends reunion tour with all these different players that he knows, like Carmelo Anthony, and bring him over to LA Lakers, maybe with Paul George. But what does it say when Derrick Rose is the best point guard you get on the free agent market? This is a guy that flamed out in Chicago. They liked him so little, they gave him to the Knicks. The Knicks, where everybody goes to die. Shout out to Stephon Marbury. Didn't even want Derrick Rose, and now he's on the Cavaliers. That's the free agent thing you're kind of looking at. You're looking at reclamation projects as opposed to the next big thing. And that's not going to change until that franchise gets more stability, and that's probably not going to happen until LeBron's not calling the shots from the locker room.
And speaking of Rose, they also brought in a guy who mysteriously for about a week left the Knicks without telling anyone right around the early part of the season, and then just showed up like nothing happened. And nothing did happen with the Knicks. They were like, okay, thanks for coming back. But I think it does speak to where, again, this dangling issue that LeBron does with these teams, where you even in Miami, where he was getting frustrated and then he bolts for Cleveland because Cleveland was clearing cap space and getting room for him. I feel like there's some teams out there on the Los Angeles Lakers, like you mentioned, potentially even the Clippers were thrown in there too, that they could shred some cap space if they really wanted to. How does that affect the long term, in your mind, just the general future of the NBA, not just the Cleveland Cavaliers? Because it feels like we're in this tailspin of teams that recognize they're not going to get necessarily any better, so they're gonna tank. They're gonna tank for some good young talent, and then they're just gonna shred contracts in an effort to entice a free agent to come over and spend a ton of money. Now, it's not going to necessarily work for maybe a place like Sacramento, where they're always constantly terrible managerially and on the court. But the major market teams that can do this at will without any real repercussions, it just seems to me that ultimately you're going to get a diluted product where you're still going to get the same type of teams over and over again, and it's not nearly as interesting.
I think we need to see it work first. Isn't that the key? Cleveland had an easy shot in LeBron's native son. Yeah. We've seen Philadelphia try to do this, and it hasn't worked yet, and it's been 5 years. We've seen other major market teams try to do it, and it hasn't worked out, like the Clippers with Blake Griffin. So until we see it work, I'm not too worried about it. This is kind of like the Moneyball in baseball. Everybody thought it was the hottest thing. They tried to do it. Only one team made it work. And after a while, it kind of faded into obscurity. And now sabermetrics are part of the game, but they're not the main focus. It'll be the same thing here. It might be a trend for a while, but it's going to fade into obscurity unless it really works well.
Okay. Well, we're going to keep an eye on this, obviously. We're going to keep our hand on the pulse of the situation. Just like keep. Yeah. You just made a new catchphrase. Keep it popping. Let's turn now to the NFL. NFL is in the midst of training camp. This usually isn't, unless there's a catastrophic injury, you usually get the type of news stories like there was a fight or someone's holding out, and that happens. But one story in particular that we wanted to highlight was that Joe Flacco of the Baltimore Ravens was having major back issues and is set to be out, I believe, for about a month or so, if not more. So the opportunity came up for a NFL team to perhaps bring back Colin Kaepernick, who has been, for lack of a better term, exiled from the NFL, even though he is a capable player and has the training and the ability. But instead, and John Harbaugh actually mentioned that Kaepernick and all options are available to the team. And then the next day, they brought in a arena quarterback, which no knock against arena quarterbacks in general, but given the context of Colin Kaepernick being a free agent and the controversy surrounding his free agency, what were your thoughts when you saw that, Franco, and where do you think that this Kaepernick thing ends up?
Again, you're just hitting the home runs with loaded questions today.
I know. I'm good.
So I want to believe, for my own sanity, that arena quarterback just is a better fit for the system. The reality is when you bring in a Kaepernick-like player, you kind of have to adjust the system for the running ability. And maybe the Ravens didn't want to do that. And that's the easy answer, and that's the answer that I'm sure the Ravens will go with, and that's the narrative the NFL wants you to think. I do think there's a larger issue happening here, and it's kind of gross and icky, for lack of a better word. This is the same league that had Ray Lewis convicted for killing a dude I mean, not convicted, but tried for it.
Mm-hmm.
And the next year, he was leading jersey sales. Same league where Greg Hardy threw a woman down on a bed of guns and told her how he was going to murder her. And the Cowboys sold his jersey and signed him after he made that witness disappear by paying her off. It's insane to me that we have a player that can play, and you can't in good faith tell me Kaepernick's not better than at least a few quarterbacks in the league. It's just not. It's not a reality.
Yeah.
He led a team to the Super Bowl. This is not Tim Tebow with a little bit of luck. Like he plays well.
Oh yeah.
This is a narrative where our current political climate in the country is not comfortable, one, with his message, and two, with how he chose to do it. And he's seeing a backlash that's not unlike gerrymandering in some ways, and it's kind of scary and it's depressing, in my personal opinion. I mean, how do you see it?
I think it's depressing too. I think it's just, this maybe even just 5 years ago, you were not having this conversation with a guy that you just said brought a team to the Super Bowl. So regardless of whether or not you have to modify if we're talking about a specific team needing to modify, that's one thing. But in general, of all the teams in the NFL, there's not one place where this guy can play or this guy can work, or even if it is in a dual capacity where he's the quarterback on the running downs and doing some different things, but like nobody wants to hire this guy, and it's very disturbing. And you're right, there are a lot of teams that have really terrible quarterbacks or have rookie quarterbacks. The Bears rookie quarterback, what's his name? I'm blanking on his name.
Trubisky.
Yes, it came out in the Bears camp that he fumbled the ball 3 times during the snap during their practices. So it's like you have a capable player in Kaepernick that, maybe if you're a team that has a rookie, you get that guy, you get Kaepernick in to help facilitate the transition, as opposed to putting all your faith like the Bears did in a guy that right now is really just struggling with the basic fundamentals of football, which isn't the best sign when you're the number 1 draft pick for your team, and all the controversy surrounding the Bears too with regard to that pick. So I think that's sort of one of those glaring examples to me where that could have been an opportunity.
I mean, I think you're right, and there's been multiple opportunities. Seattle needed a backup, and he would have fit that system. The Los Angeles Rams have Jared Goff as a starter, who's a second-year starter who struggled. It could have been good to bridge to Jared Goff. The Bears aren't as much of an opening just because they have a veteran quarterback they brought in to kind of ease Trubisky in. But nonetheless, it's a good example. And the disturbing part is the controversy is won over the symbolism of what he did.
Right.
Fair enough. He kneeled during the national anthem. As a veteran, I will tell you, it's well within his right to express himself as he wants to express himself. And can you tell me, as a viewer, how many other players kneeled during the year? Brendan, give me one name of one other player that kneeled, because
I don't know the name.
There were hundreds of them that knelt after Kaepernick did. So he was the first, and that's the issue. Second, he's not as flashy, right? He is not dating Giselle. He's not a Caucasian quarterback. So he's in this weird position. And do you even know what the protest was about? Out of curiosity.
I'm trying to remember off the top of my head.
Equally my point. It was police brutality.
Yes.
And I'll give you a real honest example, and we're getting a little political right now, but I don't know about you personally. If I'm in trouble, depending on where I am in the country, I'm not going to call the police. When I lived in Maine, I wasn't calling the police department if I was in trouble. I was relying on my own abilities to get away from there because I don't want to add fuel to a fire that's already volatile. Mm-hmm. Here in Green Bay, I will not call the police if I'm in trouble unless it's something that really demands like police action. Like I found some in my house. Even then, we've learned that's not necessarily the safest thing. Mm-hmm. I mean, maybe back home in California it's a little different. Maybe in New York, maybe a little bit different. Maybe in LA it's a little different. But where I am in the country, I'm not necessarily comfortable as a person of color calling the police. And that's something that needs to be addressed. I'm not a criminal. I hold how many degrees? I've never had a crime against me as an adult. I mean, these are things where I should be completely fine calling somebody that's protect and serve, but I'm not willing to do it. And that's what Kaepernick's trying to say. That's a narrative that has to change if we're going to have a successful society. Is that a message you disagree with?
No, I don't disagree with it. I mean, I think that the other thing I want to call attention to is that it's for me, I think it's not. It goes a little bit beyond the protest itself because it's not just like Kaepernick decided to do the protest and that's it. He's actually being very proactive And it's commendable and admirable that he's going across the country giving speeches to youth across the country about what their rights are, how to deal with police brutality, how to deal with their community. And I think instead of that being celebrated and embraced by the NFL, that has a cadre cliched new promotional things, when all of a sudden, like you mentioned before with Greg Hardy, when all of a sudden domestic violence was an issue, then the NFL's against domestic violence. When we're at war, then it's all NFL's all for America. They do breast cancer events, they do all types of promotional and fundraising events, but I haven't seen the NFL or Roger Goodell mention one time anything to do with police brutality, anything to do with the work that Kaepernick is doing, and that is, there's a lot to be disappointed about, but to me that's the most disheartening aspect of this, is that it's not even, it's not one thing if it's an individual, but it's the entire league that is completely being blind to what great work one of their players is doing.
You know, the thing is that that's a hot button issue, right? In our current political environment, there are people that don't even see police brutality being a problem. That's the problem, and that's a demographic that the NFL kind of caters to in some ways. Breast cancer awareness, we all know breast cancer is bad. Domestic violence, for the most part, we can all agree, really bad. The NFL will tackle issues as long as it's safe. But the bottom line is, and we've said this on the show, I feel, plenty of times, the NFL is a business. And while they do have a moral position to make action happen and to make change, they're not going to do it if it doesn't help the bottom line. And to attack something that currently is a hot button issue and that's not easily agreed upon, something they're not going to do, even if it's the right thing they should do, they're not going to do it. Especially given the demographic of who watches the NFL and who plays the NFL, this is an issue that should be at the forefront, and it's not. And it won't be. Again, with our conversation 2 weeks ago, look at the ownership of NFL teams. There is your answer to the question, and there's the reason why it's never going to change. But we can move on to something more fun.
We can. And the one last thing, too, I think the other big NFL note is that they actually also, in addition to just the political issues that they have and the myriad of issues that they have, they've also just recently dropped out of the concussion concussion research that they were doing as well. So fun times ahead for the NFL. But we will transition, but I wanted to get that out there because that also made the news this week.
Yeah, fascinating setting.
Yeah, sad times. But transition we will. Transition we shall. And San Diego Comic-Con was this past weekend, I believe, right?
Yep.
Down in San Diego, it's usually the time of year where we get to see a lot of interesting and fun trailers. I feel like movies, and maybe this is a side tangent, but movies just feel like one giant trailer to lead up to them. So I feel like it's really hard when you get into like trailer. Did you see trailer number 3? Oh no, you only saw trailer number 2? You got to see 3, and then 4 is coming out in 2 weeks. It just kind of doesn't make sense. But the 2 that I wanted to highlight was the Justice League released a more in-depth promo than they had before, and it featured sort of your first looks, a little bit of the villains, which were teased. I'm laughing because they're teased in the cut footage from the theatrical release of Batman vs. Superman, where Lex Luthor speaks directly to one of the demigods that Apocalypse has, which again, why would you cut that out when that makes more sense as to why Lex Luthor did what he did, but that's besides the point. And it offered some more character development, bigger highlight of Wonder Woman, which I'm pretty sure was probably edited after the success of Wonder Woman. Probably that was Wonder Woman being the forefront, probably wasn't the initial go that Warner Brothers had in mind. And then you get a little bit of Aquaman, you get to see them fight, you get to see a little bit of humor from Ezra Miller's Flash, which we'll talk about a little bit. And then it kind of gave you a little bit more insight, more into sort of how the characters interplay with each other, necessarily than plot. But what were your thoughts when you saw it?
So there's a lot I didn't like about the trailer. We'll start with Aquaman.
Yeah.
It's a character that's going to be hard anyway because it's never been a very popular character in the comics pathos.
Right.
But they turned him into, I'm trying to think of it, it's like a live-action heroic Homer Simpson. Like, he's every bro ever, but he also has superpowers. And that's ridiculous. I can't stand that part of it. And I get the everyman approach, but it's the idea of Aquaman is that he's fighting for Atlantis and he's royalty and he's holier than thou, and they basically just dumbed that down. I think you're right about Wonder Woman. I think they've cut trailers to feature more of her in it, but I feel like the initial footage was shot with her being kind of a background character.
Yeah.
So I dislike that. I dislike that they made Cyborg some sort of Michael Bay-esque Transformer-like machine, complete with the same sound effects. That was insane. I cringed when I saw that. So those are my 3 big dislikes. My likes were I love Ezra Miller's Flash. I didn't think I was going to, but he has the right levity for the point, and he's charming enough to make it work, so he's a really good pickup. And then I'm eager to see more Gal Gadot as Wonder Woman, but that's where I'm at.
I liked Ezra Miller. I think it's just the only thing, it was very noticeable as humor, because I think they've made such a dark universe that, to kind of backpedal into a little bit maybe Marvel territory to make it a little bit lighter. I think they're trying to, and I think that Miller's got a lot of work to do ahead of him if he's the only bright spot of levity in this film. That's the one thing I was thinking about. I was like, I enjoyed his moments, but I was like, if that's the only moment, and I think maybe you'll get a little bit with Affleck seems to be a little bit more some levity as well, as he seems to be, and also even Alfred was kind of cracking some jokes, and I was like, well, this is a completely different tone than Batman versus Superman.
My thought was they're going to use Alfred as the comic relief.
Yeah.
And Ezra Miller, and have those two be the everyman, like, human beings amongst these gods that are kind of like sitting back and saying, oh, well, there's this guy that swims in the ocean and can talk to fish. I mean, the subject matter is absolutely ludicrous. Like, we have a character that can talk to fish. We have a character that's made out of machines besides his head and his torso. We have an Amazonian woman that's never seen a man before the 40s. Like, it's a ludicrous setup, and it needs to have some levity for it to work.
But I mean, my counterpoint would be, but even Marvel has ludicrous setups. Like, let's have a talking raccoon. Let's have a giant tree. But the way that they built it allows you to accept it in the Avengers Infinity War trailer when you see everybody fighting all together, which they did some. We don't have to talk about it too much because we did. You mentioned it correctly. We talked about it last week. But they showed them sort of working together in Doctor Strange, where you're like, I accept that in my head. I agree with you. It's hard to accept this kind of ludicrous concept of where we're going to throw in everybody in the pot and then we'll see what sticks. And I really doubt you're going to get a Cyborg solo film out of this. I think you're barely going to get an Aquaman film because they're just filming it now. Yeah. And I think you even have the subject, which is the weirdest. This is the weirdest story associated with this movie, is that Ben Affleck might not even be Batman after this movie's done, because they've already thrown out his script. He already dropped out as director. The rumor is that Warner Brothers is looking at a way to get Affleck out, because I really truly think that when they saw Batman vs. Superman not do as well critically as they thought it would, they realized they need a younger Batman, because everybody else I think is about 10 years or so younger than Ben Affleck at this moment. And I think that by the time you get to a Justice League 3, you're looking at a 58-year-old Batman, which I don't think that they're going to want to do. So I could definitely see them. This is happening. To me, I don't know how you feel, but to me, this feels like this is definitely happening. And especially, and you and I know this trick from watching sports, Affleck at Hall H had to basically say, I've been assured by Warner Brothers that everything is going to be fine. I'm going to be Batman. And you've heard that when a trade rumor comes up for a player. I'm on this team. This is my team. And I didn't hear anything. And I was like, oh, this is exactly like sports. And I know what happens in this situation. Affleck gets traded back to regular movie town, and then they're going to pull somebody younger in.
I mean, I agree completely. And yeah, Affleck's days are numbered. Friend of the show, Ben Affleck. We'll miss you, Batman. I think it depends how Justice League does. To your earlier points, I think the biggest problem is that Marvel had 14 movies to build this tone before this giant team up, whereas like DC's had 3 movies, and one was even related, and they botched that anyway. So they've had 2 movies, really, one that was successful, one that was critically panned, before going to this giant team-up movie. It's just not going to work. And I think when we see this fail, and it won't fail like in the traditional sense, it'll make back money. Oh, yeah. But it's not going to be the tentpole that Warner Brothers thinks. I think we're going to see a step back from the DC universe. I think they'll still move forward, but they'll be a lot more selective what they do. I think we'll still see an Aquaman movie, but we might not see Aquaman by himself. We'll see Aquaman with Flash or with Wonder Woman. Like, they'll have to throw another character in there to make it float, but It'll be interesting to see the gates as it comes out and see as it does. I'm not, like I said, very excited after seeing what I saw.
The last thing I want to mention is that there's a very short scene at the end where Alfred is in the Batcave and the water is kind of moving, and then all of a sudden you see a spark, and then he turns and says something to the effect of, "He told me you'd be coming back, or you'd be coming."
Yeah.
I'm 99% sure that's Superman because Henry Cavill's been advertised to be in it. Others are like, it's Green Lantern. I'm like, I don't know. We haven't seen Superman yet for a reason, because I think what's going to happen is Justice League gets their ass handed to them. They get beat up, and then Superman arrives to basically save the day.
Yeah, I think that's the really clear path they're going. And it, again, will more alienate that character in that he's always been the White Knight. He's not fallible, and we can't even let him die for one movie before bringing him back. Gosh forbid we wait until Justice League 2 to bring back Superman to build up that somewhat, like, hints throughout the other movies they're going to do. But the problem is the universe is not set. No sequels are guaranteed. So they kind of have to show their hand now, and they're wasting a big opportunity, and they're going to make people hate Henry Cavill even more. And that's not hard to do because he's not a very likable guy. So.
No. And the only thing that they can make this better is that if they pull the 90s Death of Superman storyline and put in that the returning Superman is really the cyborg. Not cyborg. Who am I thinking of in Superman supervillain history?
I don't know who you're talking about, but I remember that entire series. They had Superboy Prime, and they had Steel, and then they had...
I want Steel, I want Superboy, Vindicator.
Yeah.
That was the Kryptonian protector. And then they had Cyborg Superman, who ended up being Metallo or some sort of combination of that with one of his other villains. So maybe they do that, but I think that is giving them too much credit.
Yeah, that's too much depth for DC Comics right now. Sorry.
Too much. And then just quickly, we can touch on before we take off. Defenders was released, the final trailer. I'm excited for it. Did it excite you more or less, or about the same?
I'm thrilled for it. Basically, to leave on this note, the Defenders trailer is everything DC should have been.
Yes.
They should have taken the time to develop these characters, and then when they come together, it makes sense. And even when one fails, like Iron Fist, he is buoyed by the strength of the other three. That's how DC should have done it, and that's why that trailer is fantastic. It almost makes you like Danny Rand, and that's saying something.
Yeah, it does, actually. And I think that did a lot. I think that did a lot for that character. Like, I've never watched Iron Fist, but I'm like, maybe I'll watch a few episodes just to get more familiar. But before, I was like, I don't want to touch this thing. But I think good job, Defenders. All right, Franco, so we were at the end of the show. What did you learn today?
I learned that I dislike Aquaman even more than I thought I did initially, but this conversation's brought out that hate. So I'm sorry. I love Jason Momoa, but Aquaman is not a friend of the show.
And I learned that, unlike Kyrie Irving, Franco, I will never ask management for a trade away from you.
Wow, thank you. I appreciate that.
That's love. We're ending on love today. All right, for the BFF show, my name is Brendan.
I'm Franco.
Bye.
Peace.